And for more, Dr. Myong-hyun, a research fellow from the Asan Institute for Policy Studies, joins us in the studio today. Welcome to the program.
My pleasure.
So there's just about a week left before the Kim-Trump summit, and eyes are on how the joint statement will shape up and what sort of deals it will contain. Now, as we heard in the previous report, CNN reported that the two sides are seriously considering exchanging liaison officers. How far do you think the negotiations have taken place based on this report? And would this be a first step to establishing formal diplomatic ties between the two?
Well, oftentimes establishing liaison's office is a first step towards a normalization of relations between the United States and another country. And I think the two countries here are taking the formal steps towards normalization. But then we have to take into account the fact that so there's a little bit of a mismatch between the negotiation position between North Korea and the United States. From what we have heard so far, from the information that we have gathered, North Korea, what it really wants from the United States is economic concessions, essentially sanctions relief. So they assign lower priority when it comes to the political symbols such as liaison's office. On the other hand, the United States is still skeptical about the possibility of a complete nuclearization of North Korea, and has been a little bit hesitant to upgrade the relations with North Korea very quickly. So instead of offering a sanctions relief, the United States is putting on the table the possibility of taking the first step towards normalization by offering to establish a liaison's office in North Korea. So this actually indicates to me that the two countries still have some gap in their positions towards denuclearization, and the United States might want to offer this to North Korea, but we don't know yet whether North Korea will take it.
Yeah, so it's seen more as symbolic. Now, under the 1994 agreed framework, better known as the Geneva Agreement, based on where it was signed, North Korea and the U.S. had agreed there to open liaison offices that would later develop into ambassadorial level, which the plan fell through. Do you think the second summit will be an opportune moment to get these talks or get these plans going again?
Clearly, the establishment of a liaison's office has become a form of leverage or like an offer to speed up the denuclearization negotiations. So it's clear that the U.S. side is making this very serious offer to North Korea. So should North Korea take it, though, I mean, given the background of slow progress in the denuclearization process, I would say that the U.S. is going to propose having a small liaison's office instead of a large liaison's office. In a way, the size of the liaison's office to be established in Pyongyang could be indicative of how successful the negotiations are going to be between the two countries. If the U.S. is going to establish a big liaison's office with multiple staffers, that would indicate that the United States is very optimistic about the eventual denuclearization of North Korea and are going to use the liaison's office as the basis to upgrade it to an embassy down the road. But then if U.S. offers a small liaison's office, such as the one that they could put in as a side office along with within the Swedish embassy compound, Sweden having offered the consular service to American citizens in North Korea, then that would indicate that U.S. is still a little bit skeptical about the successful negotiation to denuclearization. So I think it remains to be seen.
So shifting gears to the summit itself, we still don't know where the summit venue will be held or at which hotels leaders will be staying. Now, a high possibility for the summit venue is the Vietnam National Convention Center, where the 2010 ASEAN summit was held. And another option that's being speculated is the Hanoi Opera House, which was built during the French colonial era. What significance do these two venues have?
Well, there's not really political significance attached to these venues per se, but it's all about the location and the distance between the hotel and the conference venue for respective leaders. The convention center apparently lies closer to the hotel that President Trump is going to stay in Hanoi, and the Opera House stays actually, it's the opposite case. Opera House actually is closer to the hotel that Kim Jong-un is expected to stay. So I think that both sides are a little bit arguing over the protocol issues. I think they want the respective leaders their own respective leaders to stay closer to the conference venue, which makes the whole thing much simpler for both of them.
So something we'll still have to wait for. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's de facto chief of staff, Kim Chang-sun, is stepping up preparations in Vietnam. There's reports that he's viewing some possible sites that Kim could visit. So as he is a key official in charge of protocol, a lot of attention is on where he visits because Kim Jong-un could actually potentially visit these sites. And instead of flying straight to Hanoi, the official went via Guangzhou, and while in Hanoi, he also visited the Vietnamese border with China. Now, given that Kim Jong-un's father, Kim Jong-il, also made a visit to Guangzhou back in 2006, do you think there would be a potential visit by Kim Jong-un himself, given that the city is known for reform and economic development?
Well, clearly, Kim Jong-un is on a drive to give out this perception that North Korea is going to embark on a major economic reform and opening. So in that sense, visiting Guangzhou is a very symbolic step and symbolic location to connote that kind of message to the rest of the world. But it doesn't mean that just because his chief of staff visited Guangzhou and the border between Vietnam and China, that Kim Jong-un is also going to take that route on the way to Hanoi. It's just one of the many options that probably North Korea is entertaining at the moment.
So a lot of things remain under the wraps, a lot of speculation. What do you think is the likeliness of Kim Jong-un traveling to Vietnam through a land route?
Well, I think that's a little bit, I'll be surprised if Kim Jong-un is going to take the land route from North Korea all the way down to Vietnam. Apparently, it's going to take multiple days, at least 3 days. And we're talking about crisscrossing a huge country like China, north and south. So that's going to represent an enormous amount of disruption to the economic activities in China, the second largest economy in the world. So I don't think it's likely for him to take the land route, but he might actually use part of the trip using train. So that's a possibility, but I wouldn't expect Kim Jong-un to make the whole trip to Vietnam by train.
So while there is speculation about a small deal or a big deal, U.S. President Donald Trump will likely face scrutiny when he gets back home after the summit, should the summit fail to bring about substantial progress towards North Korea's denuclearization, or depending on what sorts of concessions he makes to Pyongyang. But if he is able to make convincing progress, it could strengthen his footing in the U.S. at a time when he faces a lot of domestic issues. With that in mind, do you think it will be all efforts to make a breakthrough in this summit?
I think that's an option for President Trump, but on the other hand, it's also an option for him to keep milking his relations with Kim Jong-un and then having multiple summits down the road, because he can really continue this perception that he's working really hard and then remind every time to the U.S. electorate that he's been able to do something that his predecessors failed. So I think this second summit is not going to be the end of all summit. And I think President Trump has been trying to manage the expectations in that regard, downgrading the level of the bar for success from complete denuclearization to something about the stability and security. So I would say that he's not going to make this the upcoming summit the end of all summits. It's going to make it as another episode in his ongoing saga. So I think he's going to use that. I mean, it's actually more convenient for him to use the continuation of the diplomatic talks in North Korea for continue the, to give out the perception to the U.S. electorate that he's keep having success when it comes to North Korea.
So another of many more to come. Stepping aside a little bit, there has been speculation that the U.S. is trying to send a message to China by visiting Vietnam, especially at a time when Washington and Beijing are engaged in this trade war. How do you see it?
Well, I think that's a little bit of a stretch, I would say, because clearly, this is, the meeting between North Korea and the United States, something that's supported by China. China definitely wants to see some sort of a positive outcome to the negotiation between the two countries. So the venue doesn't really matter for China. We have to remember the last summit in Singapore, China was the one that supplied the logistics of travel to Kim Jong-un. So China, I think, is behind this, and I don't think he's going to see the venue, which is Vietnam this time, as a way for the U.S. to send a message to China that the U.S. is expanding or containing China in the region.
So Vietnam itself is also stepping up a lot of preparations on its own, giving the summit a lot of media coverage, and it's also setting up a press center for international reporters. What are some of the benefits for Vietnam for hosting this kind of summit?
Well, it clearly raises Vietnam's profile, not just the major economy or that gets a free advertisement from for advertising from the rest of the world, but also it raises its diplomatic standing in the eyes of the international community. The fact that the Vietnam has been able to host a meeting between a very reclusive, paranoid leader such as Kim Jong-un and the U.S. president is going to really be impressive. A lot of people are going to find that very impressive, and it's going to make Vietnam an influential voice in the future of the international diplomacy. So I think that's what Vietnam actually craves, and it's going to make use of it down the road.
So, shifting gears a little bit, South Korean President Moon Jae-in on Monday said that he expects great development towards developing or normalizing Pyongyang-Washington ties as well as North Korea's denuclearization. Now, his comments come amid concerns that there could only be a small deal coming out of this second summit. Now, he is expected to talk with President Trump over the phone soon. What kind of things do you think will be discussed, and do you think this will give us an idea of what to expect for the second summit?
Well, there's one standing issue between North Korea and the United States. We heard from the media reports that the U.S. might offer to sign the declaration to end the war in Hanoi. So there's some speculation that President Moon would fly to Hanoi to join the summit between the two leaders to sign the declaration to end the war agreement. But then that didn't materialize. But then I think despite the fact that the likelihood of a declaration being to end the war being signed this time, there's still some chance of that happening, and this is going to be an option for the United States to offer to North Korea as a way to incentivize North Korea to denuclearize. So I think the President Trump and President Moon are going to make the discussion about this potential option, and then sort of keep it alive, so to speak. So on the other hand, the possibility of small deal or big deal, we have to remember that just like beauty, success in the eyes of the beholder. So I think President Moon is going to find any positive outcome, no matter how big or small, as a great success. So I would say that I think President Moon is pretty positive about the fact that something will come out of this.
So before we let you go, working level talks are expected to take place this week. If the talks earlier this month in Pyongyang were aimed at browsing all the cards each side had, what do you think will be discussed this time, and do you think we'll be able to hear anything about it before the summit?
So I think we heard, at least from the American side, what the American side is putting on the table. We heard about the liaison office. We might know the possibility of discipline is lower, but declaration to end the war agreement is also on the table. And there's some sanctions relief measure. At least there will be an expansion of humanitarian assistance to North Korea. So these are the options that the U.S. side has put on the table, but we haven't heard much from the North Korean side. That's an indication that the two sides are still really working really hard to come to an agreement before they have the summit next week. So I think that's pretty much what's going on right now.
Okay, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for your insights.
My pleasure.